Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Governor, thank you for being here. This is an extremely important subject, and we appreciate your participation. Climate change is real. Climate's been changing since day one. Protecting our environment is real. We all recognize that. I noticed in your in your 7 pages of testimony that you mention a number of renewable energies such as wind, solar, and hydro, but you didn't mention nuclear. I'm just wondering, it would appear to me that we're going to have to use a number of different resources in order to get to the common goal that we want to get to, and certainly carbon capture and nuclear power are going to be a part of that. I'm just wondering, why did you omit nuclear power in your testimony?
I didn't know because I didn't write it, so we'll have to ask my staff the answer to that question.
Okay, fair enough.
But I've been very forthright in saying that we need to have under consideration any low carbon or zero carbon technology, and I think we have to be non-ecumenical about this. And I have been in my policies. I'll give you an example. In my state, Representative Rogers brought up hydroelectric. We now are classifying hydroelectric in our clean energy 100% grid, which has been a concern of some folks. I have been supportive of research and development in the nuclear industry. There are some modular nuclear systems that might be productive if, now this is a big if, we got to make sure we understand this. We need to make sure that they are cost effective, and they are not to date. As you know, the cost is what has been the biggest problem in the nuclear industry, that they're safer, that they have a waste disposal problem, and they have public acceptance. So my view is it makes sense to find out if any of those things can be solved. They would have to be solved before nuclear would become a meaningful component of an energy future going forward. But I think it makes sense to look to find out if they can be. I've had a couple questions from this side of the panel about nuclear. The one comment I would make is I think it's really important for all of us to be non-selective amongst multiple low and zero carbon solutions here. I think that's important because some of them are going to pan out and some of them aren't. And I'm for having a broadest view of all possible measures.
Okay, to follow up on that comment, let me ask you this then. Do you think it's the state's role to mandate to power companies how they're going to lower their emissions, or would you agree that it would really be advantageous to allow the power companies to come up with their own plans, because what may work in Washington State may not necessarily work in the state of Georgia. I can tell you that in Georgia, Southern Company has done a good job of decreasing their emissions and has made a lot of progress, and yet the state hasn't mandated to them what types of decreases they should make.
You know, that's an interesting question. And I'll give you 2 contradictory answers. One of us is, yes, we're always looking for the most cost-effective, clean energy source to get the job done from a cost-effectiveness standpoint. But there is an argument for policies that will help specific industries move forward. And I'll tell you why. For instance, in a renewable portfolio standard, if you just have a standard for multiple technologies, the only one that gets developed is the next most cost-effective one, even though you know you've got plans B, C, and D that you're going to have to develop to get the job done. So I think there are some circumstances where policies that are specific to particular technologies make sense, because if you know you're going to have 4 different tools, you need to find a way to make sure all of those tools are developed.
Right. We may have some minor differences on that, but nevertheless, I do want to get to this before my time runs out, and that is obviously Washington State is a big forestry state. Georgia is the #1 forestry state in the nation, by the way. And I noticed, again, you didn't mention biomass, and I'm just wondering if you might speak to that, because biomass is certainly something that is American-made, if you will. It's something that we can actually do here.
Yes, I think that sequestration of carbon in biological systems is something we should explore, and we ought to see if there's a way even to create a revenue stream for people in the timber industry and the agriculture industry to sequester carbon in topsoil. And the reason that makes sense is not only can it help sequestration of carbon in topsoil, but it also, when you do those things, you prevent erosion in a lot of the low and no-till technologies. These things make sense. The same thing to be said in the timber industry. The difficulty we've had is that some of the folks who are interested in these industries have been the most resistant to actually doing things that would allow us to create that kind of program. So it will be helpful when folks, and we have some leaders in our timber industry who are interested in developing technology or policies to actually allow that to happen. It'll help when we have more folks in the ag industries want to develop policies to create a revenue stream possibly for sequestration of carbon in topsoil. I really look forward to that day, and I look forward to the day when this is a more bipartisan effort.
Well, and I recognize my time has expired, and let me say that I think this is going to be a tremendous opportunity for us. Working together and as innovative as we are in America, I look forward to this because I think there is just so much innovation out there that can be accomplished, and I look forward to working toward it.
Yeah, if the chair will allow me to just comment on this. I think this is an important point. I agree with you with this caveat, and I'll just tell you about a conversation I had with the second President Bush. It was the first time I talked to him, and we were talking about the potential of sequestering carbon from coal plants. And he said he was very excited about clean coal technology of maybe being able to sequester and put coal in the ground. And but what I pointed out to him is that that would involve additional cost, and no one's going to do it unless there's some system to create a reason to do it, and an ambition to do it, and an incentive to do it. And so the only reason to actually do it, even if the technology worked, is if you had some limitation on pollution or some other market mechanism to drive incentives. And it is the same for sequestration in topsoil or in the timber. So we have to have some mechanism to create an incentive not to put carbon in the atmosphere in the first place for any of these programs to work. And that's where we need some more bipartisan help in this regard.
The gentleman yields back. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from the state of Florida,